Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Molde contest the scoreline at the Emirates after goals they kicked into the net are awarded for Arsenal. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, Blackman, Twitter, Young Gunner. That's right. They're contesting the legitimacy. They are saying that those are not legal goals for Arsenal, that they were kicked in to the net by Molde, that they should be counted for Molde. But the idiots should understand that if it is kicked into your own net, it is a goal for the opposition. The rules are clear. They've been written down. They've been known in advance. Why contest it? Why lie about it, Molde? You lost 4-1. Take it. Take it like a man. Take it like a group of men. Take it like 11 men. This is by no means, in any respect, a political reference. This is purely a football discussion. Tim's on Twitter at Stoberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Clive's on Twitter at Clive PFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
We will save shaving your privates for later. But we will do that. I mean, we're not going to do it. We're going to give you, you know what? Forget it. It's the Europa League podcast. We can say whatever the hell we want. Nobody's listening anyway. So let's get on with it. I think that this will be a podcast that largely comes down to a discussion of two players. And the players are going to be Willian. No, I'm kidding. Pepe and Joe Willock. I think that that is where this conversation is going to be most interesting because they are the two players whose performances and whose situation in the squad is most pressing and relevant to what the first team is doing. So I think that that is where I'd like to start, because I think if there's any chance that anyone will listen to a post-Molde podcast, and as I tweeted when we fell behind, the problem with Molde, so typical, you don't notice it until it becomes a problem. The tweet was better. It was saying like, typical Molde, you don't notice it until it's become a problem, something like that. Anyway, so let's do that. Let's discuss the game more generally later, but let's get into two individuals right up front that are the crux of the conversation. Because whatever you think of Mustafi or whatever you think of Willian, you know, which I don't think you're going to have to take a long, hard guess on what I think of him, but setting that aside, Pepe and Willock are issues that we have to talk about for the first team. So, Clive, you weren't on the instant reaction pod, so I want to start with you. You know, we are a team that struggles to create chances, period. It just is who we are. There's no debating it. There's no contesting it. Whatever structure we have, whatever solidity we have, whatever quality we have, we don't create enough chances. And we have to do more. We have to do more in the box, more around the box, more shots, more chances, more goals. And there's a lot of things that I feel Joe Willock is still not very good at. I don't think he's great defensively. I think his passing in midfield is below par, below where you'd want it to be. But the amount of activity he generates around the box, near the box, is extraordinary. And even if you want to discount it based on the level of the opposition, I was just having this discussion on Twitter. Our issue actually is we need to be more of a flat track bully. That's really what we're not. United, Liverpool, City, we have a plan to compete with them. We aren't flat track bullies enough, and I think Joe Willock can unlock that. So I'm curious, how impressed are you with this performance, and do you see in this kind of performance the characteristics of a player who has something to add in those smaller games for us in the Premier League?
He has something to add, full stop, really. I think, you know, when you say we're struggling to create chances, I was desperate to say, well, why do you think that is? Right? So, and I think we both...
Because we expect the opposition to just kick it into the net for us?
No, seriously, why do we think that is? Because there are a number of answers to that question. Right? And also we're going to try to link it to players today. There's a number of answers to that question. And why I walked away from the game, actually, apart from the two good, interesting performances from these two players, was, I think, the crux of the issue, which is around consistency of technique, consistency of doing the right thing at the right times for long enough. Right? So, and we have a looseness in the upper third, in my opinion, when it comes to the real crunch moment. And I couldn't help but think back to what I thought the star of the show was Arteta, actually. And for me, he was just driving the standards up in his press conferences, saying, yeah, he's done okay, but he's got to be consistent. He's got to do it more. Got to be consistent. Got to do it more. And I just went, okay, you're lifting the standards. And my mind went straight back to Phil Foden. Right, so Phil Foden at Man City, top player, been a player on the rise for 2-3 years. An England under 17 World Cup winner, run the show, star of the tournament, the whole thing. If he was at Arsenal, he'd have 100 games by now. At Man City, they kept him. They wanted to be consistent. They wanted to raise the standards. They wanted to make him want it. They contracted him. They lost Sancho because he didn't want that. He didn't want to wait. But they kept him waiting. They gave him pieces, took him out, gave him a game, took him out. But what he was doing by making him wait, they're saying to him, this is what it needs to be not just a Man City player, but a Champions League player. That's where they live, right? So Joe Willock, we all like him because he's got the missing instinct at the moment. He's got the missing tricks. So we're liking him a little bit more than we were last year, right? Because we weren't so worried about this last year. But now we're whack-a-mole the other issues away. So now we're looking at this one. But really, for me, the interesting thing is, and this will link to Pepe as well, he's raising the standards of what it required to be in the first team. And I can hear Elliot saying, well, what about Willian then? How come he's in there? What about this player? What about that player? I think this is the first start of you need to be doing certain things to be in this first team consistently. And you've got to start doing them on a regular basis because you're playing for Arsenal Football Club. We want to get to the top four and be at the top table. And the way you've done it before is not good enough. And when I look at the creativity around the top third, I just think we're too loose still. We're too loose. We give the ball away. And it isn't just the first team plays. It's like this is a consistent theme around the upper third. And I think it's something we need to really hone in on. Some of that can be coached, some of that's mentality, some of that's concentration, and I'm sure we'll come on to that. But that's what I walked away with, particularly after listening to you guys on the instant reaction. I'm reading the interview comments and listening to them yesterday. I thought, you know what, he's starting to turn the dial up on this, what the standards are, what the requirements are to play for the club.
It's interesting too, right? Because like in my mind, Clive, I'm like, what Willock adds is a numerical advantage in the center of the box, an extra runner, an extra player in those hurtful areas that are harder to pick up. And because he's not a forward, he's being tracked by midfielders more than defenders, and that is always going to create more opportunity and more threat. It's not like we don't attack with enough players. We do the 5-channel thing, but the way they're spread out, horizontally across the pitch, you can have 5 guys at the byline for all I care. If 3 of the 5 guys are nearer the touchline than the goal, they're not really creating goal threat. Willock is making the hurtful runs into the areas where goals get scored. And he did, in fact, it says here, score a goal and basically cause 2 own goals to happen. I think it's so hard in football. It is so hard not to compare players to other players. It is just a natural tendency, and sometimes those tendencies are really unhelpful. Comparing Partey to Vieira is probably unhelpful. So I want to compare players to other players right now because I can't help myself, no matter how unhelpful it is. I can't help but look at this team and say that Pepe is a discount version of Alexis and Willock is a discount version of Ramsey. And the reason I say that is neither player is as good as the player I'm comparing them to. They have weaknesses the other players did not have, and their ceiling, the height of what they do may not be as high as what those other players did. But in terms of what they add similar characteristics that are missing. In Pepe, a little bit of devil in the final third to score an outstanding goal by himself, spot a final ball, a last little slip pass through like the one he plays to Willock. In Willock, the aggressive forward running, support running into the box, and ability to make the difference in the box once he arrives there. Is he as good a passer as Ramsey? No. Does he have the defensive energy Ramsey has? No. Does Pepe have the consistency of quality that Alexis had? No. But they add those characteristics that are in short supply. And so, look, this team finished 8th for a reason. We're not currently as good as those teams were. But if we can add some of the qualities that are missing with these 2 players consistently playing and playing real minutes, that would, in my view, correct some of the issues we have. Now, of course, the caveat you have to put in place is they're doing it against limited opposition. Molde and Dundalk are not mid-table Premier League. They're probably not bottom of the table Premier League. They may not even be top of the championship. In Dundalk's case, they might be relegated out of the championship. So it is tricky to evaluate that. But Tim, that is where I want to go. I'll let you weigh in on Willock a little more before we shift to Pepe a bit. But when I look at our attack, it is to me a case that there aren't enough players in the hurtful zones posing enough challenges to defenders, that even with the 5 channels laid out horizontally, it is still fairly straightforward for defenders to solve that issue. The number of overlapping runs in central spaces are really limited. Late arriving runs to score goals from the top of the box, like what we saw nearly happen a few times in this game, really limited. And Willock adds it. I guess what I would say, though, is, and we touched on this in the instant reaction, I want to expand on it now. Any discussion of getting Willock into the first team involves a discussion of whether he can do that in the system that Arteta has clearly outlined us wanting to play. If it's Partey and Ceballos or Partey and El Neni in midfield, if it's Aubameyang, Lacazette, and Willian, or Aubameyang, Lacazette, and Pepe up front, if it's the sort of 5 at the back that we know they are, Hector and pick a let's say Holding, Gabriel, Tierney, and Saka. All right, there's no Willock in that team. And to add him into that team, you can't just take a player out and replace him. You have to sort of change the system, in my view. So is that really the tension for Arteta now, that he has built a system he's shown real fealty to, real dedication to, and to add this quality that Willock brings into the first team isn't just about player in, player out, but it may be about changing the system altogether?
Yeah, I think so. I think you hit on something there with the kind of 5 lanes of attack. It's all very well having 5 lanes of attack, but if there's no triangles, if there's no overloads, then it is just 5 dudes standing in a line. And actually, really, what you need is, I mean, the thing I tweeted during the game yesterday is, if you don't break your own structure, you won't break the other team's structure. You do need people who are willing to break free from that a little bit, because that's how you find space. Otherwise, you just get marked, which is what happened against Leicester. They just put 5 up against our 5, and that was that. And the only players that really show any movement in that 5 lanes are the fullbacks. And and that's not a bad thing in and of itself, but in reality you need something else as well. You can't just, this is kind of the stage Emery got to, where the only move was through the fullbacks, and we weren't getting enough from our other attacking players because of the lack of overloads and things like that. And I don't think this has been an absolutely constant with Arteta. So if you think back to when we had Saka at left back and Martinelli on the left wing and Aubameyang just inside him, and you think about the movement within that, that's 3 really dynamic players who are kind of willing to jump out of their holes, and Saka and Martinelli were willing to kind of swap positions sometimes. And I guess if you look at the right hand side, where we have been a bit effective recently with Bellerin, is because Bellerin can overlap and underlap, and he does really, really well at doing that. He doesn't just run in a straight line down the touchline. There is some overlap in there, so maybe we're building it in, and maybe what we're getting from Willian or Pepe and Bellerin is kind of similar to what we were getting from Saka and Martinelli earlier in the year, kind of pre-lockdown, but. I think ultimately you need, within those 5 lanes, you need people moving. Basically, you need people either coming away and then arriving late. It's kind of like that thing that Klopp's teams always do, the kind of the attacking triangle. So when a cross comes in, they always have someone at the front post, someone at the back post, someone on the penalty spot, because that covers the 3 big areas. And basically, wherever the ball drops, if it's not a clean cross, it will usually drop into one of those areas. And we don't quite do that yet. We just have the 5 guys standing on the edge of the box. So maybe we're coming to that. And as I kind of said on the instant reaction pod, something I wrote about this week is I'm hoping that in Gabriel and Partey, we've got 2 players who can dominate space. We've got lots of ball dominant players, but they are space dominant players. And if you want to be a good attacking team, you've got to break your structure a bit. And that means you've got to leave some space behind you. And maybe now he's got those 2 players in his spine, maybe he can say, okay, I can trust Gabriel, I can trust Partey to recover into space if this attack breaks down, in a way that I can't trust Xhaka and I can't trust Mustafi and Luiz. I don't want them running back towards their own goal. So I'm hoping that we're able to kind of to move things along a bit. And look, one thing I think that has happened is, whereas Pepe, in this 5 lanes of attack, was way out on the flank, he is now, I think, a bit more inside. And maybe the right back, the right back and the right winger, I think, swap that channel a little bit. And we just need to see a little bit more of that, I think. But, in this game, I also don't think it's a coincidence that things loosened up when Saka came on, and that kind of freed Pepe a little bit, because I just think we were there's a bit more elasticity in there, because Saka can go inside and outside. He can hold the width, but he can also play as an inside forward. He just goes where the space is, and he interprets space really, really well. And I think that just loosened us up, which is why I said a couple of weeks ago I'd really like Saka to be in one of these 5 lanes of attack. And really what you'd have with Willock is essentially you'd have your 4 lanes of attack, and he'd arrive as the 5th one, maybe late in the move, maybe early in the move. One of the things actually where I think he's distinct from Ramsey, say, is Ramsey does, or often did, the late arrival, but quite often Willock, will go and stand in the box. And that in itself can create some doubt in defenders and perhaps open up space for others. So, I think I can still be patient and say that this is something that we're still developing, and that maybe now we've got a couple of players in who we spent big money on. This is an area we can really work on. And Arteta said it after the game. He said, that for where we want to go, you've got to score 90, 100 goals. And that's, that shows me that he knows, basically, and that this is at least a work in progress. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I want to take some of the premium content from the Patreon side and dump it onto this podcast real quick, because Matt from Giant Gooner does an awesome data review after every game. He did a mini one in this game that was really illuminating, and he really called out all the great things that Joe Willock did, the activity in the box, and obviously there's questions about whether it translated at the Premier League level, but after he's done praising him, I want to be clear, he praised him, so it doesn't sound like this was all negative. He did point out, the other thing I want to highlight is the stuff in our half, a miscontrol in our center attacking midfield zone. Those are the sorts of things that lead to high XG chances for the opposition when you're up against Premier League opponents. A really poor success rate on his challenges up and down the pitch, which suggests that he hasn't improved as much defensively as we want to see from him to earn league minutes. I do think that this is where Arteta is also going to be challenged with Joe Willock, is that, look, he's not a plus passer, he's probably a minus passer, and he's not great defensively. He loses a lot of his challenges, and he, I don't think he's a fantastic passer. Now, I want to counter that by just saying the data from this game is extremely positive for him. 92% pass success rate, 4 shots, 2 dribbles, a key pass. You can rule it out as being mold, but if you're going to use data, you can only use the data that's available, and he did everything in this game from a statistical and eye test standpoint that would suggest he's playing the role about as well as he can up against the opposition that he's facing. I think the distinction between his game and Pepe's game to some extent is I thought Joe Willock was uniformly excellent in this game, basically. He did everything you'd ask him to do. Whereas Pepe, at times, was so bad it made my eyes bleed, and then had moments of serious brilliance. So it's a little bit different, and we'll come to Pepe in a moment. But Clive, before we move on to Pepe, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that movement and how Willock's movement and the way that 5-channel attack works. Because I got to admit, I'm sort of souring on the 5 lanes of attack thing in the sense of what Tim said, which is if they're all on plane, if they're all horizontal, if they're not in places where they can really have interactions with each other, then I'm not sure it works. And you can't just say, but we got 5 guys in attack. Well, again, the 2 widest guys, if they're on the chalk, and if the 2 guys near them are not in the box, like you don't really have 5 guys in attack. So you want to expand on that?
Yeah, well, you also see the W effect, right? Don't you?
Yes,
the
yes.
5 guys,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want them flat. You want to get 5 people up there as quickly as possible. Everyone's doing it, so get used to it. That's the way it goes. But what we haven't got, we take the players one by one. So Saka's got the best movement. Guess what? He looks the most creative because he knows when to accelerate up to the 5 lanes if we've got the ball, and then go past and do the overlap. He's brave enough to come into the pockets, receive it, control it, turn around, 1-2, go again. He can stand in the 5 lanes, get it, turn around, and just go, okay, I'm ready to play from wide areas or inside. And he gets up and joins. So he's a good player. A good player. If you look at Lacazette, he's quite bright early on. I think focused on pressing, defending. His ball retention in the top third's not great. I don't think he shows his boots enough. I don't think he's easy to find. So, and he's a key function for me as a pivot role. So that's an issue, and that's why he didn't play for France. That's why Giroud does. Right. So, Aubameyang, I felt in his last league game, I thought that was one of his best games, dropping off the line. I thought he was brilliant, dropped off the line, really soft touches against Manchester United, really made himself available, really pressed hard. Lots of unspectacular but good build-up stuff. But do we want him doing that? Right. So on the other side, you've got combinations of Willian, Pepe. Pepe, good luck trying to work out what he's going to do and when's he going to do it. Right. So Willian at the moment, I think he's just not quite finding his rhythm yet. Maybe injuries sort of have affected him. So he's not quite finding his rhythm. We have Bellerin in that channel sometimes, who understands about the movement, he understands about out to in. But we haven't got a consistent basis of movement in a piston type way, either dropping off or going in behind. And this is why some people say, well, let's get Lacazette out, get Aubameyang in the middle, and add somebody else that can move. Because it just adds up, right? So where I was going earlier on, Elliot, with the first phase of the podcast is, what does creativity mean? Well, for me, creativity is not just in a number 10's boots, but it's in the movement that we have up front. And that movement must be something that's varied. And it's a word that I've heard Tim use before, and I think it's something we should do a lot more of. I'm okay having the 5 lanes. I'm okay having the 5 lanes defense and 5 lanes attack. But what I want to see more of is rotation within those lanes, right? And the reason why we don't is because we got a one-dimensional player playing at centre forward, which I think restricts rotation. And so the makeup of those lanes of those players and their attributes will allow people to pop up in different zones. Now, defensively, we've got people that can move from zone to zone, so we can either have a 3 or a 4 or a 5. And I think that's the next phase for us in attack, to develop people into different zones who can play. And so someone like Willian, for example, he can play left, right, centre. He can be on the outside or on the inside. And that's a good thing. Aubameyang has developed that. Lacazette, he can't be on the outside. So we need something else there. You know what I mean? So I think we're developing this 5-lane thing. Movement, creativity, running to distract, running to receive, running to engage. I've said this many times. That side of movement, that distraction running, is something I learned from watching Aaron Ramsey, funny enough. And Joe Willock does it really well. And why I was quite impressed with him in this game is that he's able to influence first team games as the youngest player on the pitch. He's able to influence it. And when you're looking at people to impress, to get into the first team on a more regular basis, you're looking at their influence on the game, not just their end product, what they do. And I think he's influenced both these games in Europa League in the same way, maybe a little bit academy-wise. By that I mean there's the opportunity to lay off shots and lay off passes he doesn't always take. He takes it for himself. But hey, look, he's trying to get in the first team, right? So, But I do like his influence, and I do like his bravery. I'd like to see more of that in some of our first 11 players, because that's the next one of the next phases for us, shall we say, to up the creativity.
Clive, before we move on, I do just want to get your thoughts. I mean, it is pretty clear that the standard of play in Europa League is real bad. And it is hard
competition.
Terrible. It's terrible. We do not want to be in it. But that does make these kinds of judgments hard. I mean, in some way, we made a lot of judgments about Arsenal after the Fulham game, and I think we got slapped with a little bit of a harsh reality just about how bad Fulham are. And these teams are, below that level. I mean, maybe they're not as bad defensively as Fulham are, but setting that aside, do you have any concerns about... Mikel Arteta wants to run a meritocracy, and if he's running a meritocracy, he has to let players who make a case for themselves get more chances. And yet, they're making a case for themselves against execrable opposition. So do you have some sympathy for Arteta not really knowing how and when to use the data he's getting from, the selling points for these players is coming in games where you're not sure how much stock you want to put in? How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, this is why I don't look at football that way around. So there are some games I really want to look at the data.
Sorry, can I just rephrase? I didn't mean literally the data. Sorry, I meant just the fact that these guys are playing good against garbage. How do you weigh that?
I tend to look at what the art of the possible is. So I'm looking at Joe Willock. I'm looking at his movement. I'm looking at his finishes. He's put a couple, really good finishes in the mid to top of the net, and I'm thinking, yeah, you look good, mate. I think he's learning to play with his teammates a bit better. I felt he was a bit of a one-man band before. So from that side of things, I look at him. I look at how he's tracking. Because Molde were more physical than Dundalk were. Obviously, he looked like a bunch of blokes out of the pub. But actually, he was running back, catching people up, just taking it off them. I'm thinking, yeah, that's not bad. No, you look quite good there. And I just felt that I look at things like whether he's trusted. Do the teammates give him the ball regular basis? And they look for him, and that's always a good sign that he's got the inter-team respect. And so I look at those sort of things there. I look at almost us as a unit rather than looking at who we're playing against and looking how we solve problems. And I think that's what I tend to look at. And I'm trying to guess what the manager's looking for. Right? So I think he's looking for defensive security for some of these players, regardless of the opposition. This is a chance to practice. Looking for defensive intensity, looking for attacking variety and security on the ball. That's just not words I'm throwing out there, because I think it's really important. We need to be better at this. I want to know, if there's some data I want to look at, I want to know how many nearly chances we make. Because we're not making enough real chances, but we make a lot of nearly chances. And this has been something we've done for years. I just don't think we're sharp enough. And I think he's trying to change that. So I'm looking at our ability in that final third. And it's patchy at the moment, without doubt. But these two are giving us something. And I think, don't look at the opposition. Look at what they're doing. Looking at their technique, what they're doing, how brave they are to influence a game. And that's what I walk away with. And because I've seen it in the first team from both of them, and I know it can transmit. He just needs to transmit more and more consistently.
Yeah, well said. So, I mean, let's get on to Pepe more specifically. And I think this is actually the harder one, Tim. I looked at Matt's data review section 2 just to sort of clarify my thoughts on this. And it is pretty clear that, like, in the early game state when it was 0-0 and 1-0 Molde, I just can't say it with a straight face. I'm sorry. He was pretty bad. I mean, not catastrophically bad, but not far off it. And there are times really where it just does not look like his feet are on straight. After we get back to level and take the lead in those game states, he's sort of stat padded a little, but that's beside the point. Like, it's another example of him arriving at the top of the box in a really dangerous space, taking a cutback first time and scoring quite brilliantly. Again, 4 shots, 2 dribbles, couple key passes, an assist. These are the things that our regular first-team players are not doing. I mean, by comparison, yes, Pepe had 12 turnovers or whatever, 14 turnovers, whatever it was. Willian had about the same in an hour of play without any key passes, without any dribbles, without any shots. It's not to. I'm not saying that to really drive the knife into the back of Willian, although we can come to that. But it's more the point that if Willian is the player that's keeping Pepe out, whatever he offers in solidity and connectivity and positional intelligence is a trade-off in terms of end product and moments of brilliance and final third capability. Now, the problem I have with Pepe is you're going to need to tolerate 75, 80, 85 minutes of play that at times is eye-wateringly bad. But I'm sort of the opinion that where this team is in attack right now, if he's going to... He looks like a guy, Tim, that if he plays 90 minutes every game, he's going to score a goal or get an assist every single game. He might be terrible outside of those moments, but he's going to do those things. And given the importance of those things in football, you can't sit a player like that down, in my view. But we know, for Arteta, commitment to positional discipline and I don't just want to say work rate, because I don't think it's that Pepe doesn't work. I think there's a little more individuality there. So where do you fall on the 85 minutes of bad play from Pepe or the 5 minutes of sheer brilliance in terms of how you weigh which one should make the decisions for Arteta about starting this guy more versus not?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? And what makes the debate so interesting is the alternative, which is Willian, who is almost the complete opposite of Pepe. They're two such polarized players, really, in terms of the type of player they are. And that's what makes the debate really interesting, because you're essentially operating with two extremes at the moment. I still think that they can meet in the middle a bit more. I think there's more in Willian in terms of end products than we've seen. And I think there's more in terms of in Nicolas Pepe, in terms of basically trapping a football properly. The thing with me, I know Clive said this on a recent pod about Pepe being engaged, and I really think that the more I think about it, the more that hits at it for me, because maybe it's just because the game states become a bit more stretched later on, and that helps him out. But for me, the defining difference is what he does in the box. When he's out on the touchline, he seems like he's daydreaming sometimes, and it's just, ball rolls under his foot, or he takes a heavy touch, or whatever. And actually, I don't think he's actually that good at beating players, which I thought he would be. I'd never seen him play for Lille, so I don't really know. But I guess I thought we were getting a guy who beats players, and he's it's certainly not on the dribble. But where his technique is virtually faultless in the box, that's the thing. And again, Paul's talked about his finishing before. His finishing is brilliant. His shooting is generally brilliant when he really, really focuses. And I don't think it's not the same as Walcott, where it's a case of he doesn't have time to think about it. I don't think it is instinct with Pepe. I think he's just when he concentrates, he really is technically really clean. That finish last night, that's not an instinct, Phil. It's maybe a bit instinct, but that is a technically brilliant finish. That's not oh my God, I've got to lump it in the net right now kind of.
No, he's a phenomenal ball striker, period.
Yeah. And so that was doing Walcott a bit of a disservice to characterise his finishing like that, because he actually had a variety of finishes. But you know what I mean? That is not I wasn't thinking, and that just naturally happened. You can see he thinks about that stuff. And that interview he gave recently, where he talks about starting out as a goalkeeper and that giving him a real edge in terms of his finishing, and his shooting's really, really good. And his final ball, I think, in those situations, as he showed for the Willock assist, is really good as well. It's a beautifully weighted first time pass. And he doesn't look rushed when he does those things, which is why I don't think it's instinct. I do think he just has that technical cleanness. It's just when he gets the ball in less advantageous areas, that technique doesn't shine through, and it just says to me that there's maybe a slight engagement issue there. And his football seems to kind of characterize him as a person. From what we know of him as a person, he's quite introverted, he's quite shy, he's quite kind of in and out, and no one really dislikes him. But at the same time, he's not which is fine, by the way. I'm not suggesting there's an issue with that. Personally, I relate to that myself. He's not the kind of go around to someone's house at the end after training kind of guy. I think he just kind of goes home and is with quote unquote his people. But that's what frustrates me about him, because I don't think that lack of technique he shows sometimes is necessary. I don't think that's an endemic part of his game. I think that's something that can be coached. As for where I fall on the kind of the end product versus the guy that holds the structure, it's kind of difficult, because a guy like Willian will do a lot of stuff that we don't really notice that the coach probably really wants him to do. And I thought, unlike a lot of people, I thought he was quite good at Old Trafford in that kind of, I guess, slightly snobbish, hipsterish kind of, or tactically he did a very good job actually, kind of way. I do think he wasn't amazing, but he was good that day, and I think he did a job that probably Pepe wouldn't have done. But I think the side I slightly come down on here is, first of all, I think Saka holds the key. I think he loosens that front line up. And I think he has a good partnership with Aubameyang. He has good partnerships with everyone, Saka, because that's the type of player he is. But I think I would be more inclined. I'd bin Pepe if we were a better team. When we had Arshavin, for example, I never took to Arshavin because I thought talented player, but his fundamentals are awful. And at that time, we had players like Nasri and Fabregas and Van Persie. So to me, Arshavin felt expendable. In this team, I'd put up with Arshavin because there isn't enough end product. And at the same time, I think our attack at the moment is like such an uninspiring mishmash. I'm not really sure that holding the structure of it is hugely valuable, if you get what I'm saying. Like, what's the point in an attack having a nice structure but not doing anything? I almost feel like Pepe is the question you park until once you start really producing, and I feel similarly about Willock as well. But it's so difficult because the front line's just not balanced. I don't think you can have Willian and Lacazette at the same time, two of the boring structure players. And at the same time, I think sometimes it's difficult to fit Pepe and Aubameyang in as wide players. I don't think that works either. So it's kind of finding the right concoction, I guess. And it is quite difficult. But at the moment, I'd put more stock in Pepe. I think some of his flaws are coachable. He's not a young player, but he's young enough. And this is where the club's money really is. I know Willian's got a 3-year contract, but he's 32. You'd be looking at his role reducing. And so really what we're saying is there's not an awful lot to choose between the two players. So choose the one that's got the end product and choose the one that you put all of that money into. I think that is slightly, not emphatically, but slightly the line I would fall on right now.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the eye test tells me that Pepe has more upside than Willian. I think if we want to be careful and use data to sort of back up what the eye test is telling us, in the Premier League, XG plus XA per 90, so expected goals plus expected assists per 90, Pepe is 7th on the team, behind Willian, by the way. If you add in the Europa League and go to all comps, he jumps up to, I believe, 5th. So it's, the idea that there's any competition really where he's setting the world on fire is, not really correct. And I think it is tricky because the moments where he's good are very eye-catching and they stay with you. And those kind of things can be over-indexed. The data says he's pretty mediocre, all comps or just Premier League. My eye test says there is something special there, but I may be over-indexing it because I believe in the talent and I want to believe in the talent. So it is a tricky one. I think that, again, I just can't help but feel that when you have what we have invested in Pepe and you have an attack that isn't really working, and the guy you're playing ahead of him is a guy who's starting to look washed in Willian and is, in my view, again, I'm not saying this is correct, but in my view, not really adding much himself. I don't see much downside to trying Pepe, especially in games like Aston Villa. Now, I'm not diminishing Villa. They've had a good start to the season, but Arsenal should be beating Aston Villa, and we should be going and attacking them a bit and trying to put them under pressure. And so in those games, I'd want to see Pepe play. I mean, Clive, these are the kind of choices that Arteta's confronted with. Unfortunately for him, there is no perfect. The question is, you can sometimes let perfect be the enemy of the good, right? So you can looking for the perfect lineup, you can wind up going away from one that works. I guess what I would say to you is that, given how many flaws there are in this side, and given that our attack has been a little bit moribund, to put it politely, is Pepe just one of those players that you naturally just say, look, the guy has something to him, play him, give him a run in the team, play him 90 minutes against lesser sides. Let's see if we can tease that out of him, or do you think that does sacrifice the structure and positional discipline that's so important to Arteta to a level that he really can't tolerate?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Pepe and how he fits on a personal level with the manager, because I think he's probably everything that he doesn't like in a player. I think we can all see the player's talent, right? So it's only a little while ago. Was it 1st of August we played Chelsea in the FA Cup final, and you could easily say that Pepe was man of the match. Some people would say that. In all aspects of the game. Team play, ability on the ball, assists, everything. Disallowed goal, which you'll remember. It's one of the most remembered disallowed goals ever because it was so good, right? So we know it's there. So it's there. Why isn't it there? And come back to my point. It's something I read, actually. Just read that his father said sometimes I have to remind him that football's his job. He has to be more serious. And when I read that, I thought, okay, now let me look at him and see what it is with him. And I believe it is definitely between the ears and how he feels and how he's made to feel important. And I heard one of your podcasts when you said, what do we do in the summer? He killed the FA Cup final and we bought someone that plays in his position. And so I didn't want to believe it. So I said to myself, Willian can play off the left, no problem. And Tim debated that. And last night we watched it, didn't we? We watched Willian on the left, we watched him on the right. I thought he was instantly more comfortable on the right. We literally bought somebody that's better or equivalent to Pepe, your record signing. And I don't feel this is smart usage of a player. And we're doing this, by the way, with another young kid centre-back. I don't feel this is smart usage of a player and how he feels on a football pitch when he's trying to adapt and adjust to the league, where it's a new league, new coach, everything's new, and he's trying to adapt to it, new systems, and we just bought someone to make him feel less important. So I asked myself a question, almost like, how can we expect him to be the £72 million player under these scenarios? When I stand there, and Tim mentioned Theo Walcott, I was going to say exactly the same thing, but in a different way. Theo Walcott probably suits his 5 channels better than Pepe does, where we're asking Pepe to stand. Because Theo Walcott would drop short, spin into the corner, in behind. He's happy on the outside of the pitch. He's got a very simple run, like Bellerin, out to in. He knows that channel really, really well. He can work it up and down. He's got the speed, which counteracts the more, shall we say, leisurely pace of Lacazette. He's got the speed. And so he probably suits this team, a young, firing Theo Walcott, better than Pepe does at the moment. Because what we're asking, in my mind, Pepe is much closer to Ozil in his dynamic. And for me, when we originally had those 5 channels, Ozil was inside Pepe, and I said to you, they're duplicating each other. But we've never really replaced Ozil. And for me, Pepe is the closest one to do it. He could be a goal scorer in Ozil. And people say, Clive, they're different players, they can't be. Well, there's different ways to create. No one creates like Ozil. He's unique. He's a unique player. He has unique pictures. That's why he's a world superstar with 30+ million Twitter followers. He's a unique footballer. He sees the game completely differently. But if you're talking the closest from an attribute perspective, it is Pepe. But can you see Arteta trust him on the interior of our team, given the ball losses he had yesterday? No chance. He's not going to do it. So we've got a problem here. We know the player that's really effective between the 8 large box lines. He's super killer. I'd like to see in a more central position. But to do that, you've got to look after the football. And I can't trust him. So we stick him out wide where he can't beat anybody because he's only got one way to go. And everyone knows which way that is. All he can do is pop it off and try to get a new shape. Now, he can beat people from central position because he can go both sides. And people don't know which way he's going to go. So they're in a different body shape to try to defend against him. So for me, you've got to allow him to run free and be free in a forward position. And, mate, do you think Arteta does that with any of his players? He doesn't. So we have a problem here. We have a player that is defined by freedom of movement and allowed to go and see and feel the game. And the closer he is to goal, the better he is. Versus a manager that's a positional manager that plays in zones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, Clive, it just, I think there's going to have to be, there's something important coming. And what I mean is that Arteta has changed the culture. He has changed the system. He has changed everything to sort of fit his image and his philosophy. And he's been fairly rigid in doing it, which I understand why you have to do that. You have to set expectations and you have to hold the players in the club and the footballing structure to those expectations. There comes a point at which you have to then start to create variations. And to be fair, I think we're starting to see some of those where, more of a 4-3-3 shape develops. He's done some things that show willingness. But I do think you look at the attack now and you say, okay, good structure in place. Like what we've done, laid the foundation. It's time to start adding in variations to this that unlock the attack a little more. And so I think it will be interesting as sort of the reality of our not so good attack, the waves of that reality crash on the rocks of the bedrock of Arteta's philosophy, his structure, his discipline, his positional expectations, things like that. So I am curious to see how he tweaks and changes those things. And Tim, I sort of hate to throw this over to you because I know it's not the right question for you, but we'll start it with you. I mean, I think the reason that this Pepe debate exists is not because Pepe's lighting the world on fire, but just because he's showing a glimmer. And I think that glimmer is still, in terms of luminosity, far greater than what we're seeing from Willian at the moment. Now, again, I know you're feeling he's not a 10, he's not a left wing, he's a right winger. If we bought him to do anything else, that's our fault, not his fault. I'm not asking you to necessarily point a finger of blame at him, but to say, is, in your view, are we getting enough from this player in the way we are deploying him that we should be continuing to stick with him at the expense of players that maybe have a little more dynamism and end product to them? Where do you fall on how many more chances Willian should get to be in the starting lineup given his performances at the moment versus trying something different? And I do think it's interesting that both Willian and Pepe started this game. I think if Willian was nailed on, sure thing, first team guy, giving Arteta everything he wants, I think he gets sat down for this game and gets rested. I think some of the players that were out there to sort of show, Ceballos included, Shaq included, are you maybe a first-team guy? Is El Neni's role cemented? I wouldn't say it is. Is Willian's role cemented? I think the fact that he played shows it isn't. And I certainly don't think from this performance he's convinced his boss that keeping that first-team role is necessarily warranted. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think there will be, a bit like the central midfielders, there will be Willian games. I think. I guess what I would say about Willian is not and has never been the guy that makes a bad attack good. He's the guy that keeps a good attack kind of ticking over. He's almost like the attacking version of a defensive midfielder, I guess. He's not the guy you build around, but he's the guy who, if you've got like an elite wide left player and a really good striker, he's really good in that. He will keep that structure and he'll keep it, like, he operates very well within those structures. And I think the problem we've got is we're not dropping him into an elite attacking structure. And if you widen out the lens, who in our attack is playing well at the moment? Lacazette's not. Pepe, well, we've just discussed, is very up and down. If we didn't, look, Aubameyang has totally and utterly earned the benefit of the doubt. But if we were just looking at this season, Aubameyang's not playing well either. And again, we can put that down to system and getting him in optimum positions and things like that. But he's not playing well either. And look, these could all be three completely different, isolated reasons for all of those. But it's kind of unlikely, isn't it? If you've got four, experienced, first choice attackers and none of them are playing at their best, there's kind of something else going on, I think. And so in one respect, I kind of feel for Willian there, because we've kind of put him in and he's looking a bit 6 out of 10 like everyone else is in that attack. And because he's the new guy, and maybe a little bit because he's come from Chelsea, I don't think that's a big thing, to be honest. I don't think he was ever reviled by our fan base. But and look, I guess if you sign a 32-year-old who's been in the Premier League for 7 years, you do expect them to kind of fit in straight away. But I guess the issue is what is he fitting into? We still don't really know what we're doing with our attack, and that's I think that's kind of difficult for him. Even putting aside the type of player he is, I do think he has been put in a less than optimal attack. So I think there's quite a lot going on. I'm not going to pretend, like I said, like Willian is not a transformational attacking player, but he can do a very good job in a good attacking structure. We haven't seen the best of Willian yet. He's better than what we've seen, and whether we ever see that, I do also think that we are kind of giving him jobs that. Not necessarily that he can't do, but that he's never been, totally elite at. I think the thing is as well, we've got him kind of wandering around into these central spaces, which I kind of understand, but he's not the guy I'd buy to do that. He to me is like the most old-fashioned Tom Finney, Stanley Matthews style winger that I can think of. He's push and run. He's really, really good at that stuff, and we're kind of not getting him doing that. And I really think that the Willian puzzle was to, if you're going to come on to the kind of, well, why the hell did we buy him then? I think it makes real sense when you think of it this way. Arsenal had a limited budget this summer. They set aside the money for Gabriel. They set aside some money for or Partey. And they hoped to sell some more players to make two of those things happen. And that was the budget. That's why we ended up with a goalkeeper for 20p. We got a pound shop goalkeeper in. And we got, obviously Arteta wanted another experienced attacker because it was Pepe, Aubameyang, Lacazette and a load of kids. And who was the best attacker available on a free transfer who happened to have a friendly agent with the club? I think it was an expedient signing. I think we're overthinking this maybe as this kind of this player that Arteta really wanted and really saw fitting in. I think maybe it's simpler than that. I think maybe he was told, look, if we get Gabriel and Partey say we've got no budget for an attacker, so if you want one, it's going to have to be free transfer, I'm afraid. And we basically did the most expedient and best free transfer we could.
Yeah, I mean, you know what's weird, Tim, is that, like, look, on the one hand, I want to just say I think he's washed and it's showing up in his game and, all the things that I'm prone to hysterically overreacting to situations. But, like, last season wasn't a million years ago, and last season his numbers for Chelsea were good, right? Like, he had a very good, productive chance creation season for Chelsea. Like, he was an effective final third player for them. So, like, It's strange credulity that, like, he got bad that quick. Like, yes, giving him that long a contract at this age seems bad to me. I'm not going to go back on that. But, like, the idea that he got bad overnight doesn't really wash. So, yes, I mean, I think there is the possibility that as we get better going forward and the system starts to, find ways to put players in more dangerous positions and interact with each other more and link up better, that Willian can be effective. The idea that Willian cannot be effective at all because 3 months on from last season he is now useless is a silly thing. And if I've said it, which I probably have, maybe I'm just a very silly person. I don't know. Clive, let's sort of tease out the last couple little details from this. Look, Mohamed El Neni is clearly the best Egyptian player in the league, well beyond Salah, the best player we've ever had. He's our best player. Setting aside the fact that that is how we now make evaluations one game at a time, the reality with Mohamed El Neni is that, like, while I'm very encouraged by the development we're seeing in him and him looking like a much better player than maybe I've given him credit for, the idea that he became a different player overnight is silly. So I think to say that Mohamed El Neni is now the nailed-on first-choice central midfield partner of Thomas Partey doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean he can't earn that. It doesn't mean he won't earn that. It doesn't mean he wasn't good at Old Trafford. It means that there's no way you can say that he has, in that one performance, made himself undroppable and made himself the first choice central midfielder to pair with Thomas Partey. So I think there is still an open competition for Xhaka, for Ceballos, for El Neni to have roles there. I think that this game was an opportunity for one of them to maybe show that they're in slightly better form than they'd recently shown, Ceballos in particular. I think Ceballos did a bit of that. Some good chance creation, some good take-ons. I don't think Xhaka did. No chances created, no dribbles completed, one bad giveaway that led to an opposition chance. Like, it's not that Xhaka was bad, it's that, once again, it's a game that just kind of bypasses him a little. And when there was a need for the midfield to be a little more progressive and a little more involved, it was Ceballos who stepped up and added that directness and that progressiveness and not Xhaka. So between those two, do you think Ceballos made the better case to have a look in at the first team, and that Xhaka is maybe, as much as it pains me to say it, drifting a little bit further and further from that role?
Yeah, so this is another interesting part of the game. So, sorry about that. Obviously,
your dog feels it is interesting as well, and I tend to agree with him.
Yeah, obviously Willock showed his stuff, and Pepe showed his stuff in patches, and Saka did. But for me, my eyes were on centre midfield straight away, because that was the absolutely stellar part of the Old Trafford performance, was how those two played together, how they played with each other, for each other, how they dominated the whole area. And for me, that approach to centre midfield is what I'm used to, right? So And when you see players that want to control a certain space, you can move and build around those players. They become the pivot of your team, right? So the moment the game started yesterday, I'm looking at Xhaka and Ceballos, and they're just not pivot players. They both have a tendency to go chasing the ball. But in a way, I'm going to chase because I'm going to go run all the way over there to the right back, within 3 yards of him, then get it off him. Then I'm going to pop it somewhere else 5 yards away. Immediately, you've separated from each other, created a distance. So there's no structure. There is no structure there. And I thought it was really apparent the difference between those two and Partey and Elneny. Partey and Elneny play on a rhythm. They play almost like a Brazilian rhythm. They have a rhythm to how they play. Their movement is so in sync with each other. And don't dismiss what Elneny has. I've said this before, that basically he has the ability to receive the ball from different angles, and that's what he wants. It's almost like you pass water through somebody. The ball's going to be able to flow through somebody really quickly. And the way that happens is all about your preparation to receive the ball. And that's where he works really hard. He puts in extra effort to make sure his body shape's at an angle, so when he receives the next pass is really obvious. And that's the skill of what Elneny has. That's what Partey has. And Xhaka does it. He said, okay, I'm not built like that. I haven't got nimble feet. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to position myself in a position that allows me to see the pitch so I can play the passes that I like to play. Now, funny enough, that happens to be the same part of the pitch that Ceballos is better at, the left-hand side, really, of our double pivot. They both want to be there. I think Ceballos is better at it, because I think when Ceballos can see the pitch on his right foot and he can see the bigger part of the pitch, I think he becomes more creative, and I think he sees things differently. And it's I haven't seen the data, but I bet you a lot of his best actions are on the middle to left-hand side rather than the right-hand side, right? So it's obvious that's where he feels comfortable. So with those two players, we have an agility issue around the ball, and we have a positional issue. I call it our offensive distances issue. So our defensive and offensive distances for Partey and Elneny are superb. And also their ability to receive the ball at different angles. And then when the pass isn't there, they manipulate it to create angles. Ceballos can do some of that when he's hot. He can do a lot of that. He hasn't got the physicality, mobility, but he tends to find it in phases. Xhaka can't. And I'm telling you, we've all said this. It's not just me that said this. This team will develop away from Xhaka, and that looks really apparent to me. He looked quite sad yesterday because he's not somebody that can be a support actor. He has to be a leader. He has to be. That's who he is. And if he's not a leader, I think we're going to lose him emotionally from the team. He's also a leader in the dressing room because the players picked him to be their captain. He's a leader within the club. He needs to be a leader on the pitch, and the football developing away from his skill sets. And that looked really apparent to me, regardless of the opposition. I don't know if you guys felt it, but I think that's where we are with him. And we need someone else now in there with more energy to upgrade Elneny, more energy, but still the same dynamics of, I want to control this midfield. You can pass through me. I can sit at the base of your team on the half turn. I can receive it and go. I can drive and dribble. I can manipulate the ball to create passing lanes. I've got to be younger and more energetic, and to do that, to be the upgrade, to allow Partey, when he eventually slows down, we've got a sprinter next to him. Does a lot of the things that he likes to do. So that, to me, is the next level. But Elneny suits his team. The bias will come again. Xhaka, I'm worried about.
Yeah, and I mean, look, whatever you think of Xhaka, he's been here several years. You may feel he gave us good service. He did the best he could. He had some really positive, productive years for us. I have a slightly different interpretation of it. Not that I ever thought he was bad, but just that I think some of the things that held us back are related to the style of player we got with him and building our midfield around him and his qualities and limitations. But I think at this point, it's moving beyond that. And, you know, that's fine. I still think there's work to be done in midfield. I still think there's players that we need in there, but it is what it is. We've gone 58 minutes or so on a game against something called Molde. And I don't know that we need to do much more here. I would simply say, Tim, that like this is job done in the group. I guess mathematically, maybe there's another win to get, but I think Arteta has a challenge now only in the sense that, look, saving your players from playing excess minutes as you approach a period of the season that is insanely busy is a huge advantage. The Champions League teams will not be able to do it, and we can. And yet, there is a clearly developing sort of first and second team of players at Arsenal. And the question becomes, what does he do with that? Because, like, you could say, oh, he played Pepe, who is a second-choice player right now, and he played Shaq and Ceballos, who are second-choice players right now. But, like, they're not really. They're first-team players. I mean, if they're not right on the brink, they're there. Like, I'm of the opinion that the Europa League teams going forward should literally be the U23, should be players that have no real path to first-team football. Give them some action, give them some access, give them first-team minutes. It means the world to them. It helps them in their development. Take the minutes out of the legs of these guys, because when you're playing 2 games in 3 days during the holiday program, it's just so invaluable. Which way do you see it? That Arteta should continue to use these games to get sharpness out of players who aren't playing every weekend game, or now just really, really, really go to reserves, U23s, like and spare the minutes of the first team players?
So I think that's not a decision he needs to make now. I think that's on a game-by-game, player-by-player basis, based on load, based on who needs minutes. We might have players coming back from injury, for example, and these Europa League games might be quite useful to drop them back in if they, if we get like an injured player. But let's say Callum Chambers or Pablo Mari, probably at some point before Christmas, they're going to come back into the team. Martinelli. So we can use these games to get minutes into those guys, and ultimately, sorry, this is going to be a boring answer. That's really where you use your strength and conditioning guys as well. I've spoken to Joe Montemurro, the Arsenal women manager, about this a little bit, because like in the League Cup for the girls, he tends not to rotate too much, like a bit of gentle rotation. And he kind of says that actually what a lot of the sports science is saying now is that resting players is not optimal, that actually it's better to just keep them going a little bit, perhaps give them 30 minutes, perhaps give them 60 minutes, depending on the player. Some players you just rest. We used to have this discussion about Alexis, right? Every time Alexis broke down, it was when he had a rest. Mm-hmm. He was one of those players you needed to keep going, and I think different players are different in this respect. The one player he is absolutely protected as much as he can is Aubameyang, and that makes sense, because if he's fit, he will play literally every single minute in the Premier League. He's not coming off, and he's 31, and that will make sense. But it kind of depends physiologically on whether he thinks it's actually beneficial to keep players, keep the hand in, as it were, and give players 30 minutes or 60 minutes here and there. That they're such highly tuned athletes now. I guess the COVID situation has made that really difficult, because we're in kind of unprecedented circumstances in terms of load management. Players having like a big break and then having like no break at all for 12 months solid is that's probably not a situation that the S&C guys have really dealt with before. So honestly, I think it's something he can like make a decision on as and when the games come, quite frankly, and that's probably what I'd do. And perhaps there are some players who still will need to prove themselves that he'll want to see more from. So I think I don't think maybe it's as straightforward. Maybe not until the 6th game. I think maybe if you've got the 6th game and it's a complete and utter dead rubber, and we've got Man City in the Carabao Cup and we want to go quite strong for that, we can look at that and say, well, okay, any guys I want to get minutes into, there's another opportunity there, or there's something we want to go for there. So let's be like much more circumspect. But yeah, I personally think in this day and age, and I think you see this with a lot of top teams now, most top teams don't make wholesale changes anymore, even for the League Cup. A lot of them tend to, they'll do a bit of gentle rotation. They'll take their big players out, often have them on the bench anyway. But you don't see, like you did 10, 15 years ago, wholesale changes anymore. And I think, I'm not an expert in this area, but I think that's because the sports science is kind of trending away from that idea. But I'm sure there are listeners who would know a lot more about it than I, who might correct or back me up on that.
Elliot doesn't like that.
No, look, no, it's, you know what it is? Like, I have to accept that, like, my default position for these games is just don't risk anyone who's important. But as sports science changes, like, one of the things we are learning is actually not playing players at all is bad for their fitness. I don't mean like their sharpness. I mean like physically bad for them. So it is a more complicated thing than just don't give them minutes. Notwithstanding like whether they'll be any good the next time they play. So Tim, I think you've outlined a really sensible approach to this, actually. And I am constantly having to update my priors about this specific thing, because you said it, we're in uncharted territory in terms of the playing rhythms now, with these seasons being clustered so close together, and with the lockdowns, and their routines are different. There's the way these athletes are micromanaged down to the last minute of their day to some extent. I mean, I know they're not. They sit on the couch and they play a lot of video games when they're not at training. But I mean, in terms of like their regiments and how much that has changed now. I mean, it is going to be very difficult to know what the right answer is here, and I think you just have to trust your sports science department. What I would just hope is that Arteta doesn't fall for some of the coaching cliches of like, we still need to go out and take every game seriously. You know what I mean? I just hope it's not that. I hate when people are like, you have a football game, you play to win it, play to win every game. Like, come on, like, we're through in the Europa League. You don't have to go to Molde away with Aubameyang up front and Lacazette. I mean, like, not that we're saying we're doing that, but you know what I mean? Like, if you're picking the guys, pick the guys because the sports science says to pick them, because there are important measurables that say they need to play, or you're trying to get a look at them to give them first team minutes, but not just because it's like some cliche, cultural thing of you play to win every game, because that can backfire. I mean, was it Santi Cazorla who we lost basically forever, playing him to like Ludogorets in a dead rubber or something like that? I may have made up some of the details there, but I'm fairly certain I'm close. Clive, last thought. Villa at the weekend. It is a weird season, and so Villa's positive results to start the season can lead to giving them more respect than they maybe deserve, if that makes sense. Saying, oh, well, Aston Villa actually are good. I'm not saying Aston Villa are bad, and I think Grealish is one of the players of the league. But, they lost 4-3 to Southampton. They lost 3-0 to Leeds. So, yes, they beat Liverpool 7-2. I'm not saying don't be careful, and I'm not saying they can't hurt you, but they can be gotten at as well. And I sort of wonder if you think Arteta is going to go the way of taking them, maybe giving them too much respect. How do you think we need to approach this game, and where do you think the best opportunity is for us to pick up the 3 points?
Yeah, Villa's a team I quite like. I think they've picked up some nice pieces. Obviously, Ollie Watkins, we all know about. A lot of money, 38 mil from Brentford. But he's a nice player. He's a young player. It's all new for him, right? So I'm also a fan as well, by the way. So as is, well, not say Grealish is, but he wouldn't mind being at the.
So you're saying he's going to throw the game in favor of us? I hear what you're saying. It's cool.
They play a front four diamond. Last game they played Traore on the right hand side. I haven't seen him. I don't know him well enough. Barkley was obviously quite good, and they have John McGinn and Douglas Luiz in behind them. And John McGinn had a good season last year, but he got injured and he come back a little bit heavy. But he seems to have a bit more time to get fitter now, so he's looking a bit better. Douglas Luiz is someone I really like, and I wouldn't mind seeing him in a red shirt. I think Tim knows a bit more about him, but I think he went to City, didn't he, Tim, when he was younger? And then
yes,
I think Villa got him from there. I don't know what he was like in Brazil. He just appeared at City and appeared at Villa to me. So I think City may have a buyback in there somewhere. So watch this boy. He's got something, and he's got a lot of things that I was talking about earlier as an upgrade, shall we say, next to Partey. So I like the team. They got a young fullback from Forest called Matty Cash. Decent up and downer. I like the team. Now, against us last time, they dropped in after they scored and held out. And Tyrone Mings is a good defender, really close to his goal. In fact, it reminds me of John Terry, how much he drops in very close to his goal. So there won't be any offsides here. It's all about how we play in behind their sort of double pivot around there. I hope we go for them, because I think they're a nice team, but they are quite, I say young, they're a bit callow in how they are. They're a little bit brittle. So when they can concede goals in bunches. But if they also get on the front foot, they could be really difficult to play against. So we mustn't respect them, Elliot, which I think was what you was alluding to. in my opinion, I want to see us really go for this team, particularly early, and put them in their place. Let them see, remind them who they are. Don't let them get excited, because going forward they could be quite interesting. So, yeah, hopefully we do that. But hey, we don't know.
Yeah, look, they've conceded 7 goals in their last 2 games. It's I think it's fair to say that you can get at them. But beating Liverpool 7-2 was an eye opener. I mean, if you push up the pitch, that's when they certainly seem like they can devastate you. So I accept that it is a challenge that Arteta's going to have to figure out. Let's leave it there, unless Tim, you have a burning Aston Villa take.
No.
I was going to then make some segue joke about burning elsewhere and things like that, but I don't have the energy for it. Let's just save that for a bigger game. So Tim's on Twitter at Roberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith, Blackman Twitter, Yankee Gunner. I would ask if you'd like to join us on Patreon. We would love to have you. We have an instant reaction pod after every match. We rewatch videos, and now when we rewatch the game, we rewatch them together and analyze them. We do scouting videos in the Spotlight podcast that we use when we want to destroy a player's career. You can look into that. We have a tremendous track record with it. There's data reviews from Matt, who I reference. There's all kinds of stuff we're doing there. Scott does an analytics pod after every game. I just really appreciate the people that have signed up and want you to know how much it means to us to have you as part of the community. But as I always say, if it's not for you, if it can't be for you, whatever the case may be, the fact that you're here at all listening to us just means the world to us. And we really appreciate it. It is a hell of a great community to be a part of, and I can't thank you enough. So with that out of the way, I can now end the podcast by saying we love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10 Villanova.